My widowed alien neighbor caught me watching her, and then invited me inside. Sherman had never thought much about his neighbors. He'd moved to the distant planet of Arica with the simple goal of starting fresh. The city of Thuros, a sprawling metropolis filled with towering glass structures and shimmering streets, felt like a new beginning. It was a place where he could leave behind old memories and the painful reminders of his past life. But as soon as he stepped into his new apartment, things didn't feel quite as normal as he had expected. Arica wasn't Earth. The world was a mixture of various alien species, each with its own traditions, language, and customs. Sherman, a regular human among them, often felt like an outsider. But that was part of the adventure, he told himself. He'd get used to it. His apartment was on the 17th floor of a sleek, modern building. His view overlooked the city's skyline, but he rarely took the time to appreciate it. Most evenings, he would sit by his window, scrolling through his tablet or watching the passing hovercraft. It was in these quiet moments, when the noise of the city seemed to fade into the background, that he noticed her. She lived 2 doors down, a woman who always kept to herself. Sherman had never spoken to her, but he saw her frequently from his window. Her apartment was far enough away that their windows didn't overlap too much, but on certain nights, they were aligned just enough that Sherman could see glimpses of her through the glass. She wasn't like the other residents. Unlike the busy, outgoing citizens of Thuros, she seemed aloof, as if there were a heavy weight on her shoulders. There were days when she sat at her window, staring out into the city, her face expressionless. On other occasions, Sherman would see her engaged in strange practices, moving slowly, with gestures that looked almost ceremonial, her arms flowing like water. It was as though she was meditating, but it wasn't anything like what Sherman was used to seeing in Earth's meditation circles. No, this was something different, something far more ancient and powerful. He couldn't explain why, but he found himself drawn to her. He watched her through the glass sometimes, not in a way that was predatory, but with curiosity. Who was she? What was her story? One night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the lights of the city flickered on, Sherman sat by his window again, trying to relax after a long day. He wasn't even thinking about her when he absent-mindedly glanced toward her apartment. She was standing in front of the window, as she often did, but this time, she was doing something completely unexpected. Her eyes were closed, and her hands were raised in the air, almost as if she was channeling energy into the sky. The air around her seemed to shimmer, glowing faintly with a blue aura. Sherman blinked, thinking his mind was playing tricks on him, but no, it was real. He was witnessing something extraordinary. She continued her strange movements for several minutes, each motion more graceful than the last. The space around her seemed to pulse, as if responding to her presence. Sherman felt a sense of awe wash over him. He couldn't look away. It was hypnotic, and before he knew it, he had leaned closer to the window, trying to get a better view of the mesmerizing scene. Suddenly, she stopped. She turned her head, and for the briefest moment their eyes met. Sherman froze, heart pounding in his chest. It was impossible to tell whether she had noticed him or if it was just a coincidence, but the moment felt heavy with meaning. Then she simply smiled, a soft, knowing smile, and raised a hand as if inviting him to come closer. Sherman's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure what had just happened. Was she aware that he had been watching her? She had looked straight at him. Could she see him through the window? He quickly turned away, his face flushing with embarrassment. But even as he tried to shake off the feeling, something in his gut told him that this was far from the end of their strange connection. The next day, as Sherman was heading out to grab some food, there was a knock on his door, his apartment door. Sherman froze, unsure who could be visiting him. He hadn't made any friends in the building yet, and he certainly hadn't expected any visitors. He opened the door cautiously, only to find her standing there. "Hello," she said in a soft, melodic voice that sent a shiver down his spine. She was standing just outside his door, dressed in a simple yet elegant outfit, her long silver hair falling loosely around her shoulders. Her eyes, a deep shade of violet, met his with an unreadable expression. "I'm Maurice," she continued, offering him a polite smile. "I live next door." Sherman blinked, unsure of what to say. He hadn't expected to see her in person, let alone have her knock on his door. Hi," he stammered, suddenly feeling very self-conscious. "I'm Sherman. I didn't expect you to come by." Maurice's smile deepened. "I'm sorry if I startled you," she said. "I just wanted to make sure there were no misunderstandings between us." Sherman raised an eyebrow, confused. Misunderstandings? Yes, she said softly. I noticed you watching me last night. Sherman's eyes widened in shock. He didn't know how to respond. I wasn't. No, she interrupted gently. It's all right. I simply wanted to let you know that I don't mind. I understand your curiosity. Sherman stood there, stunned, unsure whether he should apologize or simply retreat back into his apartment. Instead, he stood rooted to the spot as Maris continued. I wanted to invite you inside for a drink, she said. Perhaps we can talk. I find it refreshing to meet someone who's not afraid to ask questions. Sherman's mind raced. His first instinct was to refuse, but something about the way she spoke, the sincerity in her voice, made it hard to say no. It wasn't just her invitation that intrigued him. It was the way she made him feel. There was an undeniable warmth to her presence, even though she was an alien from a distant world. Without fully understanding why, Sherman found himself stepping aside, allowing her to enter his apartment. As she walked past him into his living room, Maris took a moment to look around. Nice place, she remarked, though her gaze lingered on the odd assortment of personal items he had yet to unpack. It's strange, isn't it, being in a new environment? Sherman, still a bit off balance, nodded. Yeah, it is, but it's a change I needed. She smiled again, that same enigmatic smile. We all need change at some point, don't we? Maris turned toward him, her violet eyes bright. So, Sherman, tell me, what brought you to Erica? I'm sure there's more to your story than just seeking a change of scenery. Sherman hesitated, unsure how much to reveal to a woman he barely knew, especially one who had been watching him just as much as he had been watching her. But something in her presence encouraged him to speak. She didn't feel like a stranger, even though she was an alien. It was as though she understood him in a way that made him feel less alone. Well, he began, his voice soft, I guess I'm running from something. From my past, I needed to get away. Her expression softened as if she understood exactly what he meant. A fresh start, she said, more to herself than to him. I understand that more than you might think. Sherman wasn't sure where this conversation was headed, but it was clear that there was something deeper to this woman than met the eye. She wasn't just the mysterious neighbor next door. She was someone who carried a weight of her own, something heavy and untold. I've been here for a while, Maris continued, but I've never felt quite at home. Sometimes the past doesn't let go so easily. Sherman's curiosity piqued even further. What do you mean? Maris didn't answer immediately. Instead, she simply smiled again, but this time it wasn't as mysterious. It was a smile full of sadness, and yet it felt as though she was inviting him to share in her understanding. I suppose, she said quietly, we all have our stories. And sometimes they find us when we least expect it. Sherman wasn't sure what that meant, but he was certain of one thing: this was just the beginning. Sherman sat across from Maris in his living room, still processing what had just happened. She had come inside, and now they sat together on his couch. The atmosphere was tense but not uncomfortable. The strange, unfamiliar feeling of being in her presence was both calming and unsettling. Her violet eyes, full of depth and mystery, had a way of drawing him in. Sherman found it hard to focus on anything else. She had a quiet energy about her, as if she knew more about the world than anyone else. Yet there was something deeply human about her, a vulnerability hidden beneath her calm demeanor. As they sat in silence, Maris picked up a glass from the coffee table and took a sip of a drink she had brought with her, something from her homeworld. Sherman couldn't identify the liquid, but it smelled sweet, like a mix of flowers and spices. She offered it to him, but he politely declined. His mind was too occupied with what had just happened, the fact that she had invited him inside after catching him watching her. It wasn't exactly the first time he had met someone like her, but there was something about Maris that felt different. She wasn't like the other residents of Thuros, the bustling metropolis of Erica. She was detached somehow, but still so very intriguing. She set her glass down and turned to face him. I know this must be strange for you, she said, her voice gentle but firm. A human, living next door to me, but I assure you I don't mind your curiosity. I rather enjoy it, actually. Sherman shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I didn't mean to invade your privacy, he said. It's just, when I saw you, you seemed so different. Your meditation, the way you move, the way you carry yourself, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. Maris smiled slightly. I've lived a long time, Sherman, a very long time. My people have ancient practices that are lost to most of the universe. They're not meant to be understood by just anyone. Sherman frowned, intrigued. So what exactly are you? I mean, you don't look like any of the species I've seen here. You're different. Her eyes softened. I am a Ylera from the planet Morsith. We are an ancient species, older than many of the others in this galaxy. We have abilities that many would consider unnatural. She paused for a moment, as if weighing her next words carefully. But my kind does not share these abilities freely. In fact, they are not meant for outsiders, not for those who are not connected to us. Sherman blinked. What do you mean, connected? Humanity is young, she said, her voice full of thoughtfulness. You are all still learning about your place in the universe. My people, we've known these things for centuries. We've been to places in the galaxy that you wouldn't believe. Sherman was silent for a moment, taking in her words. He had heard of many alien species on Arica, but he'd never met one as enigmatic as Mari's. She was not like the others he had encountered, the busy merchants, the chatty tourists, the stoic diplomats. No, she was different. She had a presence about her that was both ancient and wise, but there was something else. A sadness, perhaps, that lingered in her gaze. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable, Sherman said, his voice softer now. I was just curious. I've never met someone like you before. I didn't even know that species like yours existed. She nodded slowly. That's because we've kept ourselves hidden, Sherman. We do not want to be known. We do not want to be studied or exploited. Our way of life, our power is sacred. I have lived through much, and I've seen things that most would not believe, things that would terrify you. Sherman could see that there was much more beneath her calm exterior. There was a darkness there, a hidden pain. She had been carrying it for years, perhaps even centuries. What happened? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't know why he asked it. Maybe it was the way she spoke, so calmly, yet with such intensity. There was a quiet strength to her that made him feel safe, even though his questions were pulling him into territory he wasn't sure he was ready for. Maris looked away for a moment, her eyes distant, as if lost in thought. My husband, he died many years ago, she said quietly. We were bound by an ancient bond, a connection that was unlike anything you would understand. We lived together for centuries, Sherman, and when he was gone, I was left alone in a world that had no place for me. Sherman could hear the pain in her voice, the weight of her words. He didn't know what to say. He had heard of the deep connection some alien species had with their partners, but he hadn't realized how profound it could be. To be bound to someone for centuries and then lose them, it was unimaginable. I'm sorry, he said, his voice sincere. I didn't know. Mari shook her head gently. It's not your fault. I don't expect you to understand. My people, we are different. We have our own ways, our own rituals. And when my husband passed, I thought I could carry on, but the pain, it never went away. She paused again, looking down at her hands, as if they held the answers to questions Sherman didn't even know how to ask. Now, she said, looking back up at him with a small smile, I'm just trying to find peace. That's all. Sherman nodded slowly, taking in her words. It was clear that Maris had been through something immense, something that had shaped her into the person she was today. She wasn't just some alien neighbor to him now. She was someone with a story, one that he couldn't even begin to comprehend. I understand, Sherman said softly, and I don't know how I can help you, but if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. Maris smiled, and this time it wasn't the same cryptic smile from earlier. It was softer, more genuine. Thank you, Sherman. I appreciate that more than you know. She sat back in her chair, her posture relaxed for the first time since they had begun talking. The air between them had shifted. It wasn't just the strange curiosity that had brought them together anymore. It was something deeper, something more human. I've been on this planet for a long time, Maris said, her voice thoughtful. And I've met many people, but you're different. You seem to understand more than most. Sherman was surprised. I don't know what you mean, she smiled faintly. You're not like the others. You don't look at me with fear or fascination. You're not trying to figure me out. You're simply here. Sherman had to admit she was right. He wasn't sure why, but he didn't feel afraid of her. Even though she was an alien, even though she had powers he couldn't begin to understand, he felt a strange sense of comfort in her presence. After a long silence, Maris leaned forward slightly. I want to show you something, she said, her voice almost a whisper. Something that has been kept from the world for centuries. Sherman's heart raced. He wasn't sure what she meant by that, but he knew that whatever it was going to change everything. He didn't want to push her, but his curiosity was undeniable. Okay, he said cautiously, his voice steady despite the rising tension. What is it? Mari stood up, moving toward a corner of the room where Sherman had never noticed an ornate cabinet. She opened it slowly, revealing a glowing object hidden inside, a small, intricate artifact. It pulsed with light, and for a moment Sherman felt as though it was calling to him, beckoning him closer. "This," Mari said softly, turning to face him with the artifact in her hands, "is the key to everything." Sherman sat in stunned silence, staring at the artifact Mari's held in her hands. The object was small, no larger than a human palm, and yet it seemed to glow with an energy that was both captivating and overwhelming. It pulsed softly, casting faint patterns of light across the walls of his apartment. There was something ancient about it, something he couldn't quite explain. He felt as though the room itself had shifted, as if the artifact was changing the very air around them. The warmth in his chest grew, as though the object was calling to him, beckoning him closer. Mari's noticed the look of confusion and curiosity on his face and smiled gently. "This is no ordinary artifact, Sherman," she said, her voice quiet but filled with an intensity that made his heart race. "This is a part of my people's lost legacy. It holds powers beyond anything you've ever seen." Sherman swallowed hard, his throat dry. "What kind of powers?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't know why, but he felt an undeniable pull toward the artifact, as if it had the power to change everything in his life. Mari stepped closer to him, holding the artifact carefully, as though it were fragile. "The power to influence the very fabric of existence," she replied softly. "To manipulate energy, emotions, even time itself." Sherman's mind raced. He had heard stories of ancient alien technologies and powers, but he had always thought they were myths, things reserved for legends. He never imagined he would encounter something so powerful, so real. "You're telling me this thing can change things?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Mari's nodded. "Yes, but it's not as simple as that. The artifact is a key to unlocking powers that should never be used lightly. My people once wielded it to achieve great things, things that led to both our greatest achievements and our greatest downfalls." Sherman's mind spun with questions. "So what happened to your people?" he asked. "Why did they stop using it?" Mari's looked down at the artifact, her expression darkening. "The power was too much," she said quietly. "When we used it to bring back the dead, we didn't understand the consequences. We thought we could control it, but we were wrong. The power we sought to harness destroyed everything we loved." Sherman felt a chill run down his spine. "You brought back the dead?" he asked, his voice filled with both awe and fear. Mari's nodded slowly. "Yes, but it was a mistake. The balance of life and death cannot be tampered with. We paid a heavy price for our arrogance. And when my husband died, I swore I would never use the artifact again. I would never make that mistake again." Sherman felt a mix of sympathy and fear. The sadness in Mari's voice was palpable. He could see that her pain went much deeper than he had realized. She wasn't just mourning her husband's death. She was mourning the destruction that had come from her people's attempts to cheat death. "I can't imagine what that must have been like," Sherman said softly. "But why are you showing this to me now? Why bring it out after all these years?" Mari's looked up at him, her violet eyes filled with a strange, unreadable emotion. "Because I need your help," she said. "I've kept this artifact hidden for so long, afraid of what might happen if it fell into the wrong hands. But I can't protect it forever. It's time to make a decision." Sherman blinked. "A decision about what?" Mari's took a deep breath, and for a moment her face softened. "The artifact has the power to resurrect the dead," she said quietly. "But it comes with a price. It always does. I can't stand the thought of living with the loss of my husband forever. And yet I know I cannot use this artifact, not after what happened before." Sherman's heart pounded in his chest. He understood now. Mari's was torn. She was caught between the pain of her past and the temptation to undo it. It was a choice that no one should ever have to make. "So you want me to help you decide whether to use it?" Sherman asked, his voice trembling slightly. Mari's nodded. "Yes, I know it's a lot to ask, but I can't make this decision alone. I've lived with this pain for so long, Sherman, but I need to know if it's worth the risk. If bringing him back is worth the cost." Sherman felt his throat tighten. He didn't know what he could say, what advice he could give. He was just a regular human with no experience in ancient alien powers or the consequences of tampering with life and death. But he understood loss. He had felt it too. He had lost his family, his friends, everything he once knew. I don't know what to say," Sherman admitted. I don't know if I'm the right person to help you. I don't know if I could make that kind of decision. Maurice smiled faintly. I don't expect you to have all the answers. I just need someone who will listen, someone who can help me see the truth of it all. Sherman stood up, his legs unsteady as he walked toward the window. He gazed out at the city below, the lights flickering like distant stars. He couldn't imagine what it must be like for Maurice. To lose someone she had been connected to for so long, to have the power to bring them back, and yet know the consequences of such a decision. It was a burden no one should have to bear alone. Maybe, he said slowly, turning back to face her, maybe it's not about bringing him back. Maybe it's about finding a way to move on. You can't bring someone back from the dead, Maurice. But that doesn't mean you have to live in the past forever. You've already lived so long, you've seen so much, you've learned so much. Maybe it's time to use all that to build something new. For the first time since they had started talking, Mari's face softened with something that resembled hope. You're right, she said quietly. I've been so focused on the past that I've forgotten to live in the present, but it's hard, Sherman, it's so hard. Sherman stepped closer to her. I understand, but maybe it's not about forgetting. It's about finding a way to live with what you've lost and still move forward. You don't have to erase the past, but you don't have to be chained to it either. Maurice looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face as if weighing his words. Finally, she nodded. Perhaps you're right, she said softly. I've been so afraid of what I might lose that I forgot to think about what I might gain. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of their conversation lingering in the air. Sherman didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. Whatever decision Maurice made, she would not have to make it alone. He was here ready to support her no matter the outcome. Maurice stood up and gently placed the artifact back in its hidden compartment. Thank you, Sherman, she said quietly. I don't know what I would have done without you. Sherman smiled faintly. You don't have to thank me. I'm just here to listen. She smiled back, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. Perhaps that's the most important thing, to be heard, to know that someone understands. Sherman nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew that Maurice had made the first step toward healing. And maybe, just maybe, he had helped her find a path forward. As they sat together, the quiet between them was no longer awkward or uncomfortable. It was a quiet of understanding, of shared moments, and of the possibility of new beginnings. The next few days passed in a blur for Sherman. Every time he saw Maurice, something in the air felt different. There was an unspoken understanding between them now, a deeper connection that neither had expected when they first met. Sherman had come to realize that he wasn't just there to offer advice. He was part of her journey. She wasn't just a mysterious alien neighbor. She was someone with a story, with pain, and with a powerful, ancient burden that she had been carrying for far too long. Maurice had told him she needed time to think about the artifact, about whether she should use its power to bring her husband back. Sherman had tried to offer her his perspective, to see beyond the past, to build a future that was not weighed down by grief. But he could tell that the decision wasn't that simple. She had lived for centuries, and her people's connection to life and death was not something easily cast aside. It was the following evening when Sherman found himself at the edge of the city, overlooking a small park where the neon lights of Thuros seemed distant, like stars in a far-off galaxy. He often came here when he needed space to think. The park was quiet, almost deserted, a place where the noise of the city didn't feel so close. He had been coming here more frequently lately, a place where he could clear his mind. He hadn't expected Maurice to join him. But when he turned around, there she was, standing a few feet away, her violet eyes catching the light from the overhead street lamps. She had a peaceful expression, but there was a heaviness in her presence, a tension that had been growing in her since they had last spoken. I thought I might find you here, she said softly, her voice gentle and unhurried. You always seem to come here when you need to think. Sherman smiled faintly. It's quiet, helps me clear my head. Maurice stepped closer, her footsteps almost soundless against the grass. I understand, she said, her eyes reflecting something deeper. There's a lot on your mind these days, isn't there? Sherman nodded, not sure what to say. He wasn't sure what he was feeling himself. The closer he got to Maurice, the more complicated everything became. There was something about her, something in the way she moved, in the way she spoke, that made his heart race. He hadn't expected to form such a bond with her, let alone become so emotionally involved in her struggle. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, she continued, her gaze turning toward the distant city skyline. About moving forward, about not living in the past. You were right. I've been holding on to my grief, to my memories of him, but what if I'm wrong? What if I'm making a mistake by letting go of the chance to bring him back? Sherman's heart skipped a beat. He could see how torn she was. The conflict was visible in her eyes. She wanted to move on, but she didn't know how. She had lived with the loss for so long, it had become a part of her. The thought of erasing that grief, of giving up the chance to reconnect with her husband, was more than she could handle. I think the hardest thing, Sherman said quietly, his voice filled with empathy, is accepting that you can't always control everything. You can't fix the past, but you can choose how you move forward. You don't have to let go of everything, Maurice. Maybe the memories are still part of you, but you don't have to keep living in them. She turned to him, and for a moment their eyes met. Sherman felt as though she could see right through him. He had never felt such an intense connection with anyone before, an understanding that went deeper than words, deeper than actions. Maurice smiled softly, though there was still a sadness in her eyes. You're wise beyond your years, Sherman. It's strange, isn't it? How a simple human can teach me things that my people never could. Sherman felt a wave of warmth wash over him. He wasn't used to being called wise, but somehow in Mari's presence he didn't feel so ordinary. He felt connected. Like their shared moments of vulnerability were building a bridge between them, one that neither of them fully understood yet, but one they couldn't deny. There's still so much about your people that I don't understand, he said. But I think that's part of it, isn't it? Understanding something, not by knowing everything about it, but by simply being present with it. Mari's smile deepened, but there was a shift in her expression, a subtle change that Sherman couldn't quite place. She looked down at the ground for a moment, then back up at him. Her gaze was more intense now, more focused. You're right, she said softly. I've spent so much time holding on to what I lost that I forgot to see what I still have. But there's one thing I need to tell you, Sherman, something that I've been keeping hidden. Sherman felt his heart race again, his curiosity piqued. What is it? He asked, though he had a sinking feeling that this wasn't going to be an easy conversation. Maurice hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. My people, we have a gift, she began. A power, a way of connecting with others that goes beyond simple emotions. It's something we've learned to control over centuries, but it's dangerous. It's a forbidden power. Sherman's mind whirled. A forbidden power? He repeated, trying to make sense of her words. Maurice nodded. Yes, it's the power to influence emotions, to connect with others on a level that's deeper than anything you can imagine. It's called empathic fusion. When it's used, the bond between two beings becomes irreversible. The connection is permanent, and the emotions shared are shared forever. Sherman's breath caught in his throat. He didn't understand all of it, but the gravity of what she was saying was unmistakable. The thought of being so closely bound to someone else, to share every feeling, every thought, every moment, it was overwhelming. Why is it forbidden? Sherman asked, his voice shaking slightly. Maurice looked away, her expression hardening. Because once it's done, it can never be undone. The bond is too strong. You can't separate yourself from someone once that power has been used. It's a connection that can't be broken, and if one of us dies, the survivor carries that connection alone. Forever. Sherman felt a chill run down his spine. He hadn't expected this. The weight of her words hit him hard. The thought of being bound to someone so completely, so intimately, it was both beautiful and terrifying. He couldn't imagine what it must have been like for Maurice to have that connection with her husband and then lose him, to carry that bond alone. I didn't know, Sherman said softly, his mind reeling. I had no idea it was so intense. Maurice turned back to face him, her eyes searching his face. It's not something I would wish on anyone, Sherman, but it's a part of who I am, a part of my people's history, and it's a part of me that I've been hiding from you. Sherman swallowed hard, feeling a mix of emotions. I don't know what to say. Maurice stepped closer to him, her presence overwhelming yet comforting. You don't have to say anything, I just needed you to know. I've kept this power hidden for so long, but now I don't know what to do with it. There was a long silence between them, the weight of her confession hanging in the air. Sherman's heart was beating faster now, his thoughts racing. He didn't know what the future held for them. But he knew one thing for certain: whatever decision Maurice made, they would face it together. He looked into her eyes, feeling the bond between them grow stronger. You don't have to carry this alone, he said, his voice firm. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together. Mari smiled, a mix of relief and gratitude in her eyes. Thank you, Sherman, she whispered. You've given me more than I ever expected. Sherman nodded, though his heart was still heavy with the weight of her words. He didn't know what was coming next, but he knew one thing. They were no longer strangers. Whatever the future held, they were connected now, and that was something neither of them could escape. The days that followed felt like they were stretched out longer than they should have been. Sherman and Mari spoke often, sometimes about trivial things, sometimes about the future. Their connection had deepened in ways neither had anticipated, and yet, the decision that Mari's had to make loomed over them both like a heavy cloud. The artifact was still hidden away, but its presence was felt in every conversation they had. Sherman could see the conflict in Mari's eyes, the struggle between wanting to bring back the past and the quiet realization that her past could never be undone. Mari's had spent most of the past few days in deep thought. She had been grappling with her emotions, trying to find a way to make sense of the power she held in her hands. She had told Sherman about empathic fusion, the power to bond so deeply with someone that the connection could never be severed. But as much as it was a gift, it was also a curse. It was a bond that could never be erased, and if used incorrectly, it could trap her in a place of unending grief. But even as she thought about the risks, a part of her still wanted to try to see if there was a way to bring back the love she had lost. She couldn't help it. The memories of her husband, the life they had shared, were too strong to ignore, and the thought of living without him forever was almost unbearable. Sherman had told her that he would be there no matter what decision she made. He had promised to support her, and in his eyes, she saw nothing but sincerity. He wasn't trying to convince her to make one choice over the other. He simply wanted to be there, to stand by her as she made this monumental decision. It was the kind of support that felt like a lifeline, and for the first time in years, Mari's began to wonder if it was possible to find something new, something real, even after so much loss. One evening, as the sun began to set over Thuros, Sherman found himself walking through the streets of the city, his mind heavy with the weight of what was happening. He hadn't heard from Mari's that day, and a part of him wondered if she was closer to making a decision. He knew it wasn't something she could rush, but he couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The air was cool as he walked, the city lights beginning to glow softly around him. He didn't know where he was going, only that he needed to clear his mind. It had been a strange few weeks, weeks filled with discoveries and emotions he hadn't expected. His life on Arica had changed in ways he could never have imagined when he first arrived. He had come to the city to escape, to leave his past behind. But now his past felt like a distant memory, and his future was uncertain. The streets were relatively empty, and Sherman walked aimlessly until he found himself at the park where he and Mari's had met several days ago. He hadn't meant to come here, but now that he felt the familiar weight of her presence in the air. He sat on a bench, looking out at the city. He tried to focus on the sounds of the evening, distant chatter, the hum of hovercraft in the sky, but his mind kept drifting back to Mari's. It wasn't long before he heard the soft sound of footsteps behind him. He turned to see her standing there, her silhouette framed by the soft glow of the city lights. She had a quiet, determined look on her face, and for a moment, Sherman felt his heart race. This was it. The decision was coming. Mari's walked over to him, sitting down beside him on the bench. They were silent for a few moments, neither of them sure what to say. The weight of the situation was heavy between them, but there was also something else, something hopeful, as though no matter what happened, they would find a way forward together. I've been thinking, Mari said quietly, her voice low. I've thought about everything you've said, about moving forward, about not letting the past define me. And I've thought about the artifact, about what it can do. I've been afraid, Sherman, afraid of what will happen if I use it, afraid of losing myself in the process. But I also know that I can't keep living like this, stuck in the past, unable to move forward. Sherman's heart ached as he listened to her words. He knew how much this decision weighed on her, how much it meant to her. But at the same time, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of relief. This was the first time she had truly said it out loud, that she was ready to let go, not of her husband, but of the idea of bringing him back. She was ready to find her own path, even if it meant living without him. I know how hard it is to let go of someone you've loved for so long, Sherman said softly, but maybe it's not about forgetting them. It's about carrying them with you in your heart and letting them be a part of your story. You don't have to bring him back to keep the love you had for him alive. Maurice looked at him, her eyes searching his face. She didn't say anything for a long moment, but Sherman could see the struggle in her expression. She was torn between two worlds, the world of the past, the world she had shared with her husband, and the world of the future, a future that she could build without him. Finally, Maurice spoke. "I've realized something," she said, her voice steady. "I've been so focused on the idea of resurrecting him, of undoing the past, that I've forgotten what's most important. What's important is that I'm still here, I'm still alive. And I still have the ability to move forward, to find new connections, new experiences, to live my life fully." Sherman felt a sense of relief wash over him, but there was also something else, something he hadn't expected. He felt proud of her. Proud that she had come to this realization on her own without anyone pushing her. Proud that she was ready to step into the future, even if it meant doing so without the person she had loved most. "I think you're right," Sherman said, his voice soft. "You don't have to live in the past. You can carry the love you have for him with you, but that doesn't mean you have to stay stuck there. You can build something new, something beautiful." Maurice smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Thank you, Sherman," she whispered. "For being here, for being a part of this. I don't know what I would have done without you." Sherman didn't know what to say. He wasn't sure what was going to happen next. He didn't know if their paths would continue to cross or if they would go in separate directions. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like everything was going to be okay. "I'll always be here," he said quietly, looking out at the city. "No matter what." For a long moment they sat together in silence, the weight of their conversation settling between them. But it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two people who understood each other in a way that went beyond words, beyond time, beyond the past and the future. As the stars began to twinkle above them, Maurice took a deep breath. "I'm ready, Sherman. I'm ready to move forward. I'm ready to live again." Sherman smiled, a smile full of warmth and understanding. "I'm proud of you, Maurice. You're stronger than you think." Maurice looked at him, her eyes full of gratitude and something else, something that felt like the beginning of a new chapter. Together, they stood up, the quiet hum of the city surrounding them, but it didn't feel so overwhelming anymore. There was hope in the air now, the kind of hope that only comes when someone is finally ready to face the future. And as they walked together through the streets of Thuros, side by side, Sherman knew that whatever happened next, they would both find their way forward. Not because they had the answers, but because they had each other. And sometimes that was enough.